Just a little bit about myself. I was born and reared in western Iowa on a dairy farm. I attended country school, first 8 grades, and my senior year in high school I took a normal training course which qualified me to teach in a country school when I was 18. However, I went through two years of college before I was 18. And then I taught in the country school, and when I graduated from college, I taught 1 year in high school in Deloitte, Iowa. Came out here August 1st, 1933 to work for my uncle, Dr. Willis, in his hospital on 7th Street, which is now the 7th Street Theaters. And they would not accept my Iowa teaching certificate, so I had to take the teacher's examinations for Colorado. My first year of teaching in Colorado was Southside School. Out on the 20-mile road. And I lived in town with 4 of the Stevo teachers and drove back and forth in one of Dr. Willet's cars. And of course it wasn't a paved road, and I remember that I got stuck several times. And my son likes to tell the story that I met my husband when he pulled me out of a mud hole. He thinks I met him before, however, but Jim likes to tell that story. I had 5 pupils at the Southside School, and I think I had 4 grades. Maybe Eunice Dorr could correct me on that. I think there were 2 people in 1 grade. Eunice was one of my pupils out there, and the only living one was the 5. I then went to the Mesa School. And I taught there 3 years. For being a teacher, you are also given another job, and that is janitor, which you're not paid for. It was our responsibility to keep the schoolroom clean and to keep the fires going in the wintertime, carry the coal and kindling from the coal house, which was back of each of the school buildings that I taught in. And of course there was no plumbing, so therefore we had outside toilets, and we were to be sure to inspect those. We carried our water, and I don't remember of ever using water on the floors. Now, I may be mistaken about that, but we were given a sweeping compound that looked like sawdust. It was chemically treated, and we used that every night to clean the floors. I had 24 pupils. The last year I taught at the Mesa School. I had 15 the first year and 18 the second year. And when they were restoring the schoolhouse, I took it upon myself to see if I could locate all my pupils. And I located all but and the whereabouts and what happened to all of them except 3. Bobby Pratt and the 2 Marquettes that I never did find. And so I know where all of these are, what's happened to all of the rest of them, the main families out there. My biggest problem probably in teaching in a country school was the fact that you had so many grades, you had to correlate your different subjects. And I very often have the older children help with the younger ones, especially with reading and arithmetic and penmanship or writing were probably the things that I emphasized the most. And in writing we used the old Palmer method. I read a story up at the extended care this morning on penmanship on a girl that was growing up in a country school, and she quoted using a Peterson writing book. I never heard of that before. We used Palmer method, and probably some of you are familiar with that. Of course, the big duty in the wintertime was to keep the schoolhouse warm, and keeping a fire in a large stove overnight was something I had to learn to do. And, but it was, as a general rule, the school room was warm enough for us. If it wasn't, I know that in the south side, we gathered around the stove because I drove back and forth and I wasn't always there early enough to start the fire. I lived in a two-room house out on the Mesa, and it was very pleasant to be right next to the building. We had, our morning started with the Pledge of Allegiance, and our afternoon we had a break of 15 minutes in the morning and a 15-minute break in the afternoon. School started at 9 in the morning and ended at 4 in the afternoon. And the hour was probably the longest time, and that's when the youngsters were out playing games, in the wintertime building snow courts and so on and so forth. The children helped me a great deal, especially in a large group, because the older ones could help with the younger ones. And the blackboards, of course, the girls especially were anxious to clean the erasers because they could always go out on the porch and clean the erasers. I have difficulty in remembering just how I correlated the subjects. I know that we had spelling, especially on Friday afternoons, we had to spell out. And on, I think I took words probably from different books for different classes. I'm not sure about, some days we had history and some days we had geography. We alternated when they had the larger school. And to me, my time out of the Mesa was one of the happiest times of my teaching, I think. I was in a community that were very close-knit, and they were very cooperative. And some of the families that were in the neighborhood, I had youngsters for 3 or 4 grades. One family especially, I had 5 children from that one family. I think I'm more open for questions than I am for telling, but I might give you the names of the families that I had. I had Bruners, I had Dental Chalmers from the Rabbit Ears. I had 2 Muirheads from one family and 2 Muirheads from another Muirhead family. I had the Lufkins, and I had the Arnolds, one from each family. And I had the Bradys. There were 5 children from the Bradys, and I still keep in touch with 2 of them. I also had Albert Boucher. I believe those are outside of and Harriet Temery was with me on the last 2 months of my teaching at the Mesa. As I said, had Eunice at the Southside. I don't know, I think I'm open for, I didn't know what you wanted to know. I just know that it was a very interesting experience, and that's what I was qualified to teach. And it's been so long ago since I've taught that I can't remember how you correlated the subject. Maybe somebody can help me with that.
Do you remember what your pay was?
What?
How much were you paid?
Okay. Back in Iowa, I was paid $75 a month. And here, if I remember correctly, Southside paid me $80, and when I went to Mesa, they paid me $85.
When was the last year you taught there?
Okay, I taught the Mesa School in the fall of '35 through the spring of '38.
Okay. And when did the school close? When did it?
That, I can't tell you that. I wouldn't have any idea.
At what age did a student normally graduate from the school or stop attending school?
Okay, the 8th grade. I had one through first grade through the 8th grade. We did not have kindergarten, and the county superintendent gave a final 8th grade examination. And that was their graduation. The community, the schoolhouse was the center of the community at that time. People didn't come into town for their entertainment. We had programs on special occasions and dances. We had pie socials and box suppers. And most everybody attended when they were out there. And those were our chief entertainment.
Natalie, they did have a high school in Steamboat, in town.
Yes, yeah, there was a high
Just went on.
school. There was a high school in Steamboat. Yeah, and there was Lloyd Lufkin was coming to town at that time, and so was Aldine Arnold. They were both, and I believe Eunice. So they were fun. Do you have a question?
I was just going to tell a story on you. I'm writing a book about Western women, so I've interviewed Natalie a couple times. And when Natalie moved here and moved in with the 5 teachers in Steamboat, she had never played cards. It wasn't allowed in Iowa. And these women all played cards. And the trick was that the person who lost the card game had to clean the house the next day. So she spent the next couple of years every Saturday.
Incidentally, I was living with 4 Steamboat teachers in the Brumell house up on Crawford Avenue, and that was what we did on Friday evening, and that was how it turned out. Some of you may remember Louise Joyce. Well, I don't know whether you were or not. Louise Joyce and Zella Miller, Zella Funk. I roomed with Zella Funk. Gertrude Graves and I can't think of the name of the other teacher. There were 4 of us, and we had a housekeeper. We lived in the Brumell house up on Crawford Avenue. That's when I drove back and forth to Southside.
I remember reading in the paper about, I don't know if this was long before your time, but a school teacher coming into this valley had very severe regulations about social life and about dress, and in other words, you couldn't go out with a man unless you had the principal's permission, and all kinds of things. Did you have any kinds of...
Not here, but in Iowa, when I signed up to teach in the little high school in Deloitte, Iowa, they were very strict. We couldn't play cards, we couldn't dance, we couldn't date, not even on weekends. And one of the teachers with whom I taught, her family lived on a farm about 10 or 12 miles out of Deloitte, and I would go home with her on weekends, and then we would go about 30 or 40 miles to another town to dance. They kept pretty good watch of us. But I didn't have a contract like that here.
Why did you quit teaching?
Well, I got married. Well, and I did teach 1 year after I was married, before my children were born. I taught the 6th grade in Steamboat in the old grade school building, which was torn down. I taught the 6th grade.
Natalie, can you talk a little bit more about your time with Doc Willett? Because a lot of people probably don't know a lot about him.
About who?
Doc Willett?
Oh, Dr. Willett? Dr. Willett, of course, was my uncle. He was my father's younger brother, and he practiced medicine here for over 50 years. He graduated from St. Luke's Hospital in Denver and came over to Laramie, Wyoming to work, to practice for about 5 months. And then he heard there was a vacancy in Steamboat. There were 2 Dr. Blackmers here at that time. And Dr. Blackmer, one of the Dr. Blackmers was going back to Oklahoma to his old home. So Dr. Willett came over here with the idea of staying about 5 years and building up his reputation. But as most of you know, he was here the rest of his life. And when I was without a job, it was during the Depression, and the small high school that I was teaching in was going to combine home economics with my history and English classes, and I wasn't qualified to teach home ec. So Dr. Willett said if I would come out here, he would give me a job of helping with the cooking and the cleaning, and eventually I'll learn to give hypos. And at that time, bedpans. I remember, tell a story about that. I remember Jay McFarland's father was in the hospital, and he kept calling me Carrie, and I said, you know that's not my name. And he said, well, you carry bedpans, don't you? But anyway, I do have, I don't know, I'll pass these around. Incidentally, probably some of you saw, you know, when the schoolhouse was renovated, before it was renovated, it had been painted red. Of course, it was white when I taught there. And anyway, this, you probably have all seen this. If any of you are interested, I have some pictures of the Mesa School and pupils. And this is a strange album, but when I started my book for my grandson, when he was a baby, this was the type of an album. And I have a lot of extra sheets, and I didn't want these pictures to get dirty, so I stuck them in here, but I kept trying to book that. If any of you would like to, everybody wants to look at them. Incidentally, my first year, I had 2 8th graders, Harvey Muirhead and Fletcher Muirhead. They were from 2 different Muirhead families. The next year, I had Don Lufkin was my 8th grader. And the last year, I had 6 8th graders, 3 girls and 3 boys. Betty Bruner, Jane Muirhead, Doris Lufkin, Max Selby, Denzel Chalmers, and Leon Brady. And of those 6, Leon Brady and Jane Muirhead are the only ones living. And I do keep in touch with them. And of course, I keep in touch with Don. Any other questions? Yes?
Yes, I was wondering, now you don't have to give names, but I was wondering what some of the disciplinary problems you might have had.
Oh, no.
You might want to give names.
Well, you know, actually, I can't think of any that were very severe. Really. I had a very cooperative group of parents, and I think I had a very cooperative group of children. I don't remember that I had a lot of discipline problems, not serious ones anyway. I just can't offhand think of any. In any of mine.
I'll give you some ideas since I was once a teacher. Like, would they fight on the playground or throw spitballs or show up late for school or not show up, play hooky? Or maybe
Well, I think they probably have their little squabbles, but you know, there's nothing that I can really remember. Of course, I got out and played with them. That was another thing. I did get out and play with them. And I even went skiing with them on weekends. One weekend, the older girls, Doris Lufkin, Betty Bruner, and Jane Muirhead and Iris Muirhead, and I all took a horseback trip up on Walton Creek to some cabin up there. Spent the weekend. And I can remember the rats running around. But I always felt very close to all of my pupils. I don't think I ever had any that I really, I mean, there were probably children that I favored more than others, but I still treated all of them the same. I just really enjoyed teaching and enjoyed being with them. So,
Did all the children in the valley go to school? And did you have any that didn't speak English so well?
No, I didn't have any.
Okay.
As I read the names, I think, of the families that I had, and I had all of those families, that is the Bruners and the Muirheads and the Lufkins and the Arnolds and the Bradys, all 3 years that I was out there. I had all those children. and then the others were just at a part of the time. But, yeah.
Do you have any idea how many of the children who finished 8th grade went on to high school?
No, I don't, really. But as far as I know, most of them did. But offhand, I can't tell you, because,
Would they have to
because
live,
after I married, I was stuck out on the ranch.
would they have lived in town with relatives or friends, or could they go in for the day? I mean, every day? To the high school? To the high school.
I don't remember. I think that Harriet went back and forth. I don't remember.
I remember Eunice riding horseback to high school.
Yeah, oh yes. And there were some that occasionally, there was a horse barn on both the Southside and the Mesa, the back of the lot, and some of the children at times did ride horseback, but not very often. Most of them, especially in the wintertime, were skiing. So,
You mentioned box dinners or box?
okay, everyone brought their own lunches in the lunch pail. I think that the last year I taught there, if I remember correctly, I did during the winter fix soup sometimes in my little house because I lived right next to the building. And
I think, were you talking about the box suppers?
That's it.
Oh, yes, well, we decorated boxes
yeah,
beautifully.
box supper, yes, they decorated, the women of the neighborhood decorated, each one brought a box with a supper in it, sandwiches or whatever.
Oh, fried
And they
chicken.
decorated the box, they were auctioned off, and the money was used to buy different supplies for the school.
Oh.
And out on the Mesa, there were two little rooms at the side of the main room, and one of them we used for a library, and the other we used for the first and second graders when they finished their lessons. And they would go in there with coloring, they had books to color and they had books to read. And one of the older children usually sat in the doorway and watched them. I had 5 first graders at one time, one year, along with the 8th graders. Somebody else.
How far did most of the children have to come to school? How many miles?
You know, I'm not good at figuring miles, but Bruners came from the foot of Rabbit Ears Pass.
So they have to walk?
They
Most of
walked,
them?
skiing. Denzel Chalmers came from up of Valley View. And I asked, if I remember correctly, they brought him down. And everybody else, as far as I can remember, walked, or once in a while, during the winter, they skied. But somebody else have a question? Yeah.
There were a lot of little country schools in the valley in the early, from up till about 1942 or 3 when they started consolidating. So there were schools scattered all around, so distance wasn't a big factor. And there was a large rural population on these farms and ranches.
Yes?
Natalie, and weren't all the families, longer time ranch families that had the children that came to school? They were ranch children mainly, weren't they?
Yes, they were all ranch children, yes. They were all ranch children. Yeah. The Bradys lived in a house where Catamount, what do you call it, Catamount Village, is that what they call it? Where they're building all those houses. The Brady children lived up on a house way up on the hill back. I remember Gwen, who was one of the girls who lives in Rangeley now, was up here last summer, and she was real pleased that they let her go in and go and see where they used to live.
Did you visit the families outside of the school? Like, was it customary for families to have you come for dinner, for instance, or socialize at all?
Well, I know that I visited all of the homes. Of course, I'll admit that I spent a lot of time at Lufkin's. And I spent a lot of time at Bruchet's, on the other side, on this side of the schoolhouse. But I did visit all of the families. Yeah.
In answer to your question, I was a docent in museum, the one run the school, and in an earlier period than you're talking here, it was customary for particularly the women who were teaching to, with all the strict regulations they had, ironically, what they called it, she slept around. They paid her taxes off by taking her in for a month, so she slept around.
Well, I didn't have that experience here. I think they kept pretty good track of me here.
It's rather customary for families to have their Sunday dinner or Friday night supper. Or
I don't remember that.
Remember that?
I don't remember that.
Did they bring you when they butchered? Did they bring you fresh meat and stuff like that?
I think that goes back to
They brought us to the hospital. When Dr. Will's private hospital, a lot of people did that.
I thought they did it for the teachers, because you lived alone out there?
I lived alone out there, yeah.
What, a couple of years?
3 years. Yeah, 3 years.
Never scared?
No. The only time that I was ever a little uneasy, I had driven, well, as I said, I had one of Dr. Wells' cars. And I had driven in to go to a movie, and I came home and there was some man sleeping on the porch of the schoolhouse. And I drove around the schoolhouse real fast and got into the teachers and locked the door. The next morning, when it was time for me to go and open up the schoolhouse, I was a little bit leery about going around the corner of the building to see, but he was gone.
Oh, wow.
Natalie, for people who lived here, I think they know that hardly ever was school called off. How was it when, in the days when you were in the country school? Did you have school almost every day, or did you have to call it off at any time?
I don't think we ever called off school. We had to come Monday through Friday from 9 to 4.
If it's a big snowstorm, that didn't make
It didn't make any difference.
It still doesn't make any difference.
These children were hardy.
Yeah.
Natalie, will you tell us how you got to school during mud season out at Southside?
Oh, at Southside, I drove, as I said, except for 1 week. When the mud was so deep, I couldn't get the car through, and I rode horseback. And I remember meeting Merle and Russell Cheek on horseback as they were riding in to go to high school. But the Southside Road, 20 mile 33, whatever you want to call it, was nothing but dirt then. Yes?
Did you have a telephone, or did anyone have a telephone in those days?
I didn't have a telephone, no. I went to Lufkin's when I wanted to call. Lufkin's or Bruchet's, either one. Somebody else had a question.
How do you feel that the quality of education, how did it compare with that of the consolidated schools?
Well, I couldn't teach now, I'll tell you that. I couldn't teach now. I visited one of several years ago, a couple of years ago, I visited 2nd or 3rd grade in Soda Creek Elementary as a guest to talk to the youngsters. And the commotion bothered me considerably. So I wouldn't be able to teach. I don't know. I think it just depends. I don't feel that they're spending enough time on the fundamentals myself.
Amen.
But I'll give you an example. I know part of you know Mrs. Williams lived out Elk River.
Isabel.
Isabel, that's right, thank you. Isabel told when she quit teaching, she told about a young man delivering coal to her. And she asked him how much she owed him, and he said, well, his computer was broken down. The computer or whatever it is. And she said, well, how many tons did you deliver and what's the price? She figured it out in her head and wrote him a check and said, this isn't right, come back, but he never came back. Personally, I feel that they are not getting enough fundamentals. But this is a scientific age, technology is the thing, and I suppose that, but it does seem to me like you have to have some of the fundamentals, especially reading and arithmetic. Now, that's my personal opinion. Any other questions? Yes?
Was there ever a time in the winter when the kids could not go play outside because it was too cold, or did they always have the right clothes?
There were times that they stayed inside and we played games, musical chairs and Farmer in the Dell. And I can't remember. Outside we played games like Andy Over and Run Sheep Run, and in the spring baseball, softball.
What happened to the house where you used to live out there at the schoolhouse? The
I do
schoolhouse
not know.
was
The
renovated.
foundation is there, but I don't know what happened to the house.
Oh.
It was sold. It was a cute little place.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Maybe it was moved, or did it fall down?
I don't have any idea. I have no idea. I suppose it was probably sold and moved.
Kirstein's tore it down, Natalie.
What?
Kirstein's tore it down when they.
Did they? Well, I wondered if they did.
What is
I was just gonna say Don would know about it.
what is
We had the idea that maybe we might put a duplicate out there, but you're giving that up.
what is Andy Over? Is that what you said? They played
Andy Over, yes.
Andy Over?
Then they chose sides and went on each side of the schoolhouse, and they threw a ball over the top. And then they would run around. The person that threw the ball would run around to get the ball, and catch the person who caught the ball. Andy Over is what they call it. There is a picture in that of some of the boys that built snow tunnels and have their heads sticking out. I think Don's one of them.
Was there a lot of discrepancy or different students in your grading system? Was your grading system similar to what we do today? I mean you have
Well, you know, I can't tell you. There were the county superintendent. You had a list of books and studies that were for each grade. Came from the county superintendent. She was over whoever was the county superintendent. I do know that the 8th grade had their final examination came from the county superintendent's office. But she had charge of all of the country schools. And I can't remember, was she an elected official, Don? Do you remember?
I think she was appointed.
Appointed, that's what I thought, she was appointed. So,
but like our range of 70, you know, used to be if you got down.
Oh, you mean the grades?
Like A, B's, C's.
They use numbers.
That's her favorite.
I don't know what a failing grade was.
Yeah, well, that's what, okay.
That's what you're talking about,
Yeah.
failing grades. Well, you know, it's been so many years ago, I can't remember. I'm sorry about that. A lot of things I don't remember. I probably haven't covered all of these things, but
Natalie, you said that the families would congregate at the school and make social events. Did they do that a lot out at your school? And did they have what you hear about the square dancing? And
I guess I didn't understand exactly what you meant.
when the people would get together at the school, would they have covered use dinners, parties, and?
Oh yeah, we had programs for all of the special days. We had programs. Now some of them were in the afternoon, and just the mothers came. And then sometimes we would have a program with songs and recitations and short skits in the evening, and then the whole community would come. But they were mostly for special occasions, like maybe Christmas. We had a Christmas party. I think we had a party at the end of the school year. I remember we had Valentine's, but those were mostly for mothers.
I just want to know if I was the only one that ever had costumes made out of crepe paper.
Oh,
For those programs.
And
Programs.
and it faded, the red faded.
We had programs like at Christmas time. I can remember I had a yellow dress with little Christmas balls sewed down the front of it. My mother decorated it all up. I was wondering if that was exclusive to Oklahoma or if other ones.
Yeah, we had a program for almost every holiday that there was something going on. But if they had something special, like somebody wanted to have a box supper or a pie social, well, that was extra. But sometimes we had singing or gave a short program, which was good. Somebody else had a question, yeah.
Did you get together with any of the other one-room schools, like the Sydney School, and do group
I
programs?
remember that we had a baseball game between Mesa and the Southside School one year, one fall or one spring. I was just trying to think. I can't remember whether we went to any other school or not. Did we, Don? But I do remember, because I had taught at Southside, but we did have a baseball game, softball game.
Natalie, did you have a special school board, like there was a director and a secretary and a treasurer, and you had to have all of them sign your contract when you were hired?
Yeah. But I can't tell you who they were.
Oh, well. But in Nebraska, that's the way it was when I worked there.
I think if I remember correctly, when I went to the Mesa, Mrs. Lufkin was on the board and Irving Arnold was on the board, but I can't remember who else was.
But in Texas, they call them trustees, school trustees. They have
They were trustees.
local election.
Yeah, well, these were, yeah.
Natalie, when you lived in the little teacherage, where did you get water and what was your bathing conditions and so on?
Well,
I know you had a wash tub on the porch. I've seen the picture.
yeah. That's what we had out at the ranch, washed up. We got water from the well
No,
and had to carry it.
no, we didn't have a well now, that we packed it over
Yeah,
from Boucher
there,
to
but
the.
Southside had a well, yeah.
Yeah, we cared for it.
And back in Iowa, the country school I taught back in Iowa, they didn't have any well, and they had to send one of the youngsters went across the road to the neighbors, carried water over. And usually the water was in an open bucket with a dipper. Yeah, and each youngster had their own. I think maybe the last year I was out here, we had one of the, that you could put water in with a little faucet, but most of the time the water was in a pail and you had a dipper. Everybody dipped into their own glass supposedly.
What did you cook on? What did you use to cook your meals?
What?
What did you use to cook your meals? What kind of a?
I had a coal stove, coal cook stove, kerosene lamp.
I wanted to point out that rural electrification didn't come to this valley until the 40s. So none of the rural families had electricity or fancy bathroom facilities. The old wash tub was the bathtub.
REA didn't start at all until 1938.
Yeah, the Stankos were hooked up to electricity 2 days after Pearl Harbor. I can remember that.
Well, Texas is the same one, right?
Yeah.
It's 41.
I think you were teaching during the during the whooping cough epidemic, did you lose students to that? It sounds like it was the whooping cough epidemic. I think you were teaching that during that period. 1933
I don't remember
maybe?
I don't remember we had any whooping cough epidemics. We had a diphtheria scare in the school that I taught back in Iowa. Everybody had to be vaccinated, and we had a vacation of a week or so. I can't remember now just what. But these, I don't remember of any epidemic.
You taught it, you keep referring to Southside. Is that another primary school, and how long did you teach there, and where is that?
Southside? Southside School is out on the 20-mile road and probably 4 miles out, just past the Stanko Ranch. In fact, part of the land that the school was on was Stanko property.
And
Well, it really wasn't, it was Dr. Willett.
Is it still standing?
Yes.
And you taught there for how long?
1 year.
And then was that the 6th grade class?
That was when I had the 5 pupils, and Unistor was one of them.
I see.
I don't know whether I've given any information or not.
I don't want to play your program, but my name is Don Lufkin, and I was one of Natalie's students. I always said I was valedictorian of my 8th grade class, but I have to admit I was only one in it. I have the greatest admiration for these teachers that taught these country schools. They had not only had 2 coal stoves to take care of, they had the schoolhouse to clean, they had their themselves to take care of, besides teaching 8th grades in the school. They really had a full-time job.
And we weren't paid any extra.
I don't ever remember having a discipline program because most of the teachers were so close to the students, it just didn't happen. And once we did have discipline problems, we generally worked it out ourselves out in the backyard. I just can't say enough about Natalie and these country school teachers. They done a fantastic job.
If I had had favorites in school, he probably would have been one. Thank you very much.